Imagine standing up at an expensive steakhouse to celebrate earning your Harvard MBA, only for your mother to look you dead in the eye in front of your boss and say, "I wish you were never born." For years, I begged for my parents' love while secretly paying every single one of their bills. But the exact moment she uttered those vicious words to humiliate me, something inside me snapped. They thought they were breaking my spirit, but they had no idea they had just completely bankrupted themselves. My name is Riley. Right now, I'm sitting on my balcony in Seattle, watching the setting sun cast a warm, golden glow over the Puget Sound. A gentle breeze carries the faint, crisp smell of the ocean, and as I take a sip of my iced tea, my mind drifts back to the exact night that changed my life forever. It happened at a high-end steakhouse in the city. I had spared absolutely no expense, booking a gorgeous private dining room at the finest place in town. The table was flawlessly set with crystal glasses and crisp white linens. My corporate colleagues were all there, raising their glasses to celebrate my newly minted MBA from Harvard. Their faces were filled with genuine warmth and admiration, but my parents sat directly across from me, their smiles tight, forced, and bitter. Midway through the evening, my mother tacked her fork against her wine glass to get everyone's attention. I held my breath, hoping, just for a fleeting moment, that she was finally going to tell the room she was proud of me. The room fell dead silent. She looked me straight in the eye, and her voice was piercingly cold and clear. "Honestly, Riley," she announced, loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear, "I wish you were never born." The silence that followed was heavy and deafening. It felt as if a physical weight had dropped right onto the table. My boss dropped his napkin in absolute shock, and my father just stared blankly at his plate, refusing to say a word. For most of my life, a comment like that would have broken me. I would have burst into tears and begged for their approval. But in that exact moment, something deep inside me snapped. I looked at her and realized that the daughter they openly despised was the very same one who had been quietly keeping a roof over their heads for years. And I knew, right then and there, that their free ride was officially over. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. From the outside, our large Victorian house with its beautiful wraparound porch looked like the picture-perfect definition of a happy family home. But inside, it was a completely different story. My younger sister, Lily, was the absolute center of my parents' universe. I was treated as nothing more than background noise. When I was 9 years old, I came home from school proudly clutching a blue ribbon for winning the regional science fair. I had spent weeks isolated in my bedroom, staying up late, poring over library books, and conducting careful experiments. I was so incredibly proud of myself. I ran through the front door, shouting, "Mom, Dad, look what I won." My mother was sitting on the living room couch with Lily, who was happily playing with an expensive new doll they had just bought her. My mother barely even glanced up at my ribbon. "That's nice, Riley," she said, her voice completely flat. "But look, Lily just got a brand new doll. Isn't it just beautiful?" I stood there frozen, holding my ribbon, feeling my heart break into pieces. I had poured my soul into that project, and all I received was a dismissive, half-hearted comment. I slowly walked down the hallway to my room and hid the ribbon at the very bottom of my drawer. That was the first time I truly realized that my achievements meant absolutely nothing to my parents. As we got older, the favoritism only intensified. Lily was a textbook drama queen. If she so much as stubbed her toe, it was treated like a major medical emergency. My parents would rush to her side, cooing and comforting her. Meanwhile, when I was 13, I fell hard off my skateboard and scraped my knee down to the bone. I limped into the kitchen with tears blurring my vision. My father briefly looked up from his newspaper, frowned, and said, "Don't make a mess on my clean floor. Go clean that up." I ended up cleaning and bandaging the wound entirely by myself, biting my lip to hold back the tears. I learned a brutal lesson that day. I could never count on anyone in that house but myself. By the time I reached high school, I had become completely invisible to them. I stopped showing them my report cards, and I stopped mentioning my extracurricular activities. I felt like an unwanted extra in their lives, a mistake they were forced to tolerate. Lily, on the other hand, could do no wrong. She was popular, but she completely lacked academic drive. She never had to work for a single thing. If she wanted a designer dress, they bought it. If she wanted to go to a party, they dropped everything to drive her. I vividly remember one night when I was 17. I had just been elected student body president after campaigning tirelessly for weeks, drafting speeches and hanging posters. It was a massive milestone for me. At the dinner table that evening, I took a deep breath and tried to sound calm. "I got elected class president today," I announced. My father didn't even look up. He just gave a dull grunt and said, "That's nice. Pass the salt." My mother instantly cut in, turning her full attention back to my sister. "Lily, sweetie, are you still going to that big sleepover this weekend?" she asked excitedly. I felt like I was drowning in plain sight. I realized that night that I could disappear from the face of the earth, and they probably wouldn't notice for weeks. Lying in bed that evening, I made a firm vow. I was going to focus entirely on my own growth and build a massive future, because no one else was going to do it for me. When I turned 18, the dynamic shifted from cold to incredibly tense. My father unexpectedly lost his factory job, and financial panic gripped the household. But instead of asking Lily to contribute, they turned their eyes strictly to me. "Riley," my mother cornered me one morning, "you're old enough to bring in an income now. We need you to pay the bills." I didn't argue. I immediately landed a job at a local diner, working grueling shifts straight after school. My life became a punishing blur of classes, double shifts, and late-night studying. I was perpetually exhausted, but I kept pushing. When I received my very first paycheck of $250, I felt a surge of pride. I thought it was my first real taste of independence. But when I handed it over at home, my mother snatched it from my hand without a single word of appreciation. "Is this seriously all you made?" she frowned, scanning the check. "You need to pick up more hours, Riley. We have real bills to pay." I wanted to speak up, to tell her that I needed to keep a little bit of my own money for gas and basic school supplies, but I didn't have the courage yet. Instead, I quietly picked up a second job on the weekends cleaning commercial offices. I would come home well past midnight, my entire body aching, yet I kept moving forward. I even started tutoring students in math during my high school lunch breaks just to squeeze out an extra few dollars. Every single cent I earned went straight into a glass jar on the kitchen counter, and my parents drained it completely every single month. When it came time for college, they flatly told me they wouldn't contribute a single dime to a good university. So, I stayed local, attending a community college while working full-time in the evenings. My grades were flawless, but they never cared. One month, things caught up to me. Between paying my own tuition and giving my parents the bulk of my check, I was entirely broke, and I desperately needed a new textbook for my advanced accounting class. I sat them down and gently explained that I couldn't fully cover their mortgage payment that specific month. My mother looked at me with pure disgust. "So, you're seriously choosing your stupid studies over your own family?" she snapped. "Lily needs a new dress for the formal dance this weekend. You can't be this selfish, Riley." I was completely shattered. To keep the peace and save their house, I ended up selling my old laptop to cover their mortgage, forcing myself to study late at night on the library's desktop computers. Lily got her expensive dress, and my parents proudly posted pictures of her smiling on social media. I stood invisibly in the background of that house, holding my used textbooks like a ghost. But then, my hard work yielded an incredible miracle. I received an official acceptance letter from Harvard Business School, and it came with a full-ride, prestigious scholarship. Overjoyed, I ran home to share the monumental news. I walked into the kitchen where my mother was cooking, my father was watching television, and Lily was scrolling on her phone. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice trembling with pure excitement. I got into Harvard Business School. On a full scholarship. My father slowly looked up from the TV. "Harvard, that's halfway across the country. Who's going to pay our bills if you leave?" My mother sighed heavily, shaking her head. "It's just too expensive to lose your income, Riley. You can't go." I tried to frantically explain that the scholarship covered everything, that it wouldn't cost them a single penny, but they didn't care about my education. All they cared about was losing their personal bank account. Lily looked up from her screen and scoffed, "So you're just going to abandon us? That is incredibly selfish of you, Riley." That was the final straw. They were actively trying to ruin my life to fund their own comfort. I refused to let them pull me down. I packed my bags, cut the cords, and boarded a flight to Harvard. Graduate school was intense, but I thrived. I was surrounded by brilliant professors who genuinely valued my insights, and friends who lifted me up. For the first time in my existence, I felt appreciated. Yet, a toxic part of me still craved my parents' validation. I foolishly kept sending them a portion of my monthly stipend and continued to answer their manipulative, guilt-tripping phone calls. After graduation, I landed a competitive position at a top-tier consulting firm in Seattle. My starting salary alone was more than my father had earned in a decade. Before making the move to Seattle, I flew home one last time, genuinely hoping that seeing my concrete success would finally make them proud. I sat at the kitchen table in my tailored, professional suit, gently placing my official corporate offer letter in front of them. My father glanced at the salary figure, rolled his eyes, and tossed it aside. Consulting, that's just a fancy corporate word for sitting around and talking. You know, Lily just started volunteering at the local animal shelter. She's actually making a real difference in the world. My mother nodded in agreement. Lily has such a pure, kind heart. She's actively saving animals' lives. You should really try to be more like her, Riley. A familiar wave of defeat washed over me. No matter what I achieved, no matter how many barriers I broke, I would never measure up to their golden child. But I held on to one final, desperate shred of hope. I decided to host an upscale celebration dinner in the city before my big move, booking the most prestigious steakhouse town. I invited my parents, Lily, my new corporate boss, and my closest colleagues. I wanted my parents to see me through the eyes of industry leaders who actually respected my mind. The night arrived, and I wore a stunning black designer dress. I felt poised, powerful, and ready to receive their long-overdue approval. But the second we sat down, my parents began complaining bitterly. "This place is incredibly pretentious," my father muttered loudly, glaring at the menu. "Look at these ridiculous prices. Who in their right mind pays this much for steak?" My mother chimed in, "The lighting is far too dim. It's completely depressing." My new boss, Mr. Thompson, gracefully tried to shift the energy. He turned to my parents and smiled warmly. "You must be extraordinarily proud of Riley. She has one of the most brilliant financial minds I've ever encountered. She is going to be an absolute powerhouse in this industry." My mother just shrugged carelessly. "Oh, Riley has always been book smart, but she completely lacks real common sense. She works herself to death and has no idea how to actually enjoy life and have fun like Lily does." Throughout the entire dinner, every single time a colleague praised my work ethic or my leadership, my parents aggressively deflected the compliment to talk about Lily. When my colleague Sarah noted what an incredible leader I was, my mother cut her off to say, "Well, Lily was voted the most popular girl in her entire high school graduating class." The humiliation was overwhelming. The crushing weight of a lifetime of rejection was boiling up inside me. When the dessert course arrived, I decided to stand up and give a toast, my champagne glass trembling slightly in my hand. "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight," I began, looking around the room. "This degree and this career mean the absolute world to me. I've broken my back to get here, and I really wanted to share this milestone with my family." I turned my eyes toward my parents, practically praying for a small smile or a nod of validation. Instead, my mother slammed her napkin onto the table and glared at me with pure venom. "You always have to make absolutely everything about yourself, don't you, Riley?" she said sharply. "This ridiculous, flashy dinner, the overpriced wine, you were just so utterly desperate for attention." The entire table went dead silent. I was completely speechless. I tried to speak up, my voice tight. "Mom, I just wanted you to be proud of me." She scoffed loudly. "Proud? You honestly think an expensive piece of paper and a corporate salary make us proud of you? You have been a difficult, cold child since the literal day you were born." And then, she delivered the words that shattered my old life forever. "Honestly, Riley, I wish you were never born. Our lives would have been infinitely easier without you." I stood there in the silence, looking at her. And for the very first time in my life, I didn't see my mother. I saw a stranger. I saw a cruel, envious bully. But I didn't cry. Instead, a wave of freezing, unbreakable resolve washed over me. I calmly set my glass down, picked up my designer purse, and said, "Okay, I'm leaving." I walked out of that restaurant and stepped straight into the pouring rain. The cold water instantly soaked my dress, but I didn't care. For the first time in 24 years, I felt completely, beautifully free. When I got back to my apartment, I sat down on the couch and logged directly into my bank accounts. With absolute satisfaction, I systematically canceled every single recurring monthly transfer to my parents' accounts. I completely cut off the funding for Lily's tuition, stopped paying their bills, and immediately changed the passwords on every single utility and shared account. It was the most liberating feeling in the world. The very next morning, my phone blew up with furious texts. "Where did you go? You were incredibly rude last night." My mother typed, "You need to send money immediately to cover our upcoming bills," my father demanded. I blocked their numbers without a second thought. I moved to Seattle and threw myself entirely into my new life. I bought a gorgeous apartment, furnished it exactly how I wanted, and built a circle of loyal, supportive friends. A few months later, my parents unexpectedly tracked down my address and showed up at my doorstep in Seattle. They looked exhausted, visibly drained, and defeated. "It's Lily," my mother pleaded desperately through the door. "She's in severe trouble, Riley. She can't pay her tuition, and her credit cards are completely maxed out." I stood in the doorway, crossed my arms, and looked at them calmly. Lily is a fully grown adult. It is time for her to take accountability for her own life choices. I am not her personal bank. My father stepped forward, his eyes wild with panic. "But we don't have the money, Riley. You're the only one in this family who has a high salary. You have to help us." I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. "After everything, after standing up in a crowded room and telling me to my face that you wished I was never born, you honestly think I am going to bail you out? The bank of Riley is permanently closed. I am completely done with you." My mother's face twisted in rage, and she screamed, "You are an absolute monster. You will regret doing this to us." I looked at them both, completely unfazed, and replied, "If being a monster means finally protecting myself from your abuse, then I will wear that label with pride." I firmly shut the door in their faces, and I have never spoken to them since. It was a painful, heavy decision, but it was hands down the best thing I have ever done for myself. Now, as I sit out on my balcony watching the sun fully set over the Seattle skyline, I know with absolute certainty that I have built a beautiful life entirely on my own terms. I was recently promoted to full partner at my firm, and I am sharing my life with an incredible, loving man named Alex. His family is warm, kind, and they accept me completely for exactly who I am. I finally learned that you don't need the approval of the people who broke you to build a happy, successful future. I am no longer the invisible daughter. I am strong, I am successful, and I am finally, truly free.